The most dangerous sound in a relationship isn't always a woman's anger. Sometimes it is her silence. And the reason silence can be more serious than anger is because anger still contains emotion. When someone is angry, frustrated, or complaining, they are usually still trying to communicate something. They may be telling you what hurts them, what they need from you, or what they desperately want you to change. They may repeat themselves, become emotional, or even start arguments because, underneath all of that frustration, there is still a belief that you might listen and do something differently. But there is another kind of silence that comes after someone has explained themselves too many times and seen too little change. That silence doesn't necessarily mean that everything is fine. Sometimes it means the person is emotionally exhausted. Sometimes it means they have stopped expecting anything to change. And sometimes, by the time you finally notice the silence, the person has already started detaching from the relationship. There are 4 stages to this kind of silence, and the 4th stage is the one you need to understand because by then, she may have already realized that she can live without you. The first stage is when she stops explaining. In the beginning of a relationship, when something hurts her, she is likely to tell you because she wants you to understand her. She may tell you that she doesn't like being ignored, that she wants you to spend more time with her, that the way you speak to her during arguments hurts, or that she feels unappreciated. She may explain exactly what she needs and even give you examples of what would make the relationship better. At this point, she is not necessarily trying to criticize you. She is giving you an opportunity to understand her and improve the relationship. The problem begins when the same conversation happens repeatedly without meaningful change. She tells you what hurts her, you apologize, you promise to do better, things improve temporarily, and then the same behavior returns. After enough repetition, she may begin to realize that another conversation will probably produce another promise rather than another result. This is where many people make a serious mistake because when she stops complaining, they assume the problem has disappeared. They think, finally, she's not nagging anymore. Finally, we have peace. But sometimes the peace is not because the problem was solved. It is because she has stopped believing that explaining the problem will solve it. Think about someone who repeatedly reports the same problem to a company. They call customer service, send emails, ask for assistance, and receive no meaningful response. Eventually, they stop complaining. That doesn't necessarily mean they are satisfied. It may simply mean they have decided that their energy is better spent somewhere else. Relationships can reach the same point. So if someone you love suddenly stops explaining what hurts them, don't just enjoy the silence. Ask yourself what they were trying to tell you before they became quiet. What did they ask you to change? How many times did you promise to change? And most importantly, did your actions actually change, or did you simply become better at apologizing? The second stage is when she stops arguing. This is where silence is often misunderstood because the disappearance of arguments can look like peace from the outside. Maybe she used to question you when something was wrong. Maybe she wanted to know where you were, why you didn't call, why you kept making the same mistake, or why you weren't giving the relationship enough attention. Maybe those conversations sometimes became exhausting and you secretly wished she would stop bringing things up. Then one day, she does. She stops asking. She stops questioning. She stops trying to convince you. You might think, finally, there is no more drama. But you need to understand that there is a difference between peace and emotional exhaustion. Peace usually comes after 2 people have addressed a problem and found a way forward. Emotional exhaustion comes when someone has had the same conversation so many times that they no longer have the energy to repeat it. Arguing requires hope because when you argue, you are still trying to influence the situation. You are still hoping the other person will understand, apologize, or change. But when someone begins to believe that nothing they say will make a difference, they eventually stop trying. That is why you should pay attention not only to how often you argue, but also to what has disappeared from the relationship. If she used to tell you about her day and now barely speaks, if she used to want to spend time with you and now seems perfectly comfortable doing everything alone, Or if she used to care deeply about resolving disagreements and now simply says, "It's fine." You shouldn't automatically assume that everything is okay. Sometimes "it's fine" means exactly that. Other times it means, "I've accepted that talking about this won't change anything." If you notice that change, don't respond with accusations or immediately assume she doesn't love you anymore. Ask her calmly whether something is bothering her and create enough space for her to answer honestly. And when she answers, listen instead of preparing your defense. You don't have to agree with every detail of what she says, but you should be able to understand why she feels the way she feels. A relationship becomes dangerous when one person feels that speaking honestly will only lead to another argument, because eventually they stop speaking altogether. The third stage is when she starts choosing herself. This stage may not look dramatic, which is why many people don't recognize it until much later. She may simply begin putting more energy into her own life. She spends more time with friends and family, focuses on her career, takes better care of herself, returns to hobbies she neglected, sets stronger boundaries, and becomes comfortable doing things without you. She may stop rearranging her entire schedule around your availability. She may stop chasing you when you pull away. She may stop trying to convince you to give her attention. Some people immediately interpret this as rejection, but choosing yourself doesn't automatically mean that you have stopped loving someone. Sometimes it means that you finally understand that loving someone should not require you to abandon yourself. Imagine someone who has spent years being the person who always apologizes first, always makes plans, always forgives, always adjusts, and always tries to keep the relationship together. Eventually, they may look at themselves and realize that they have spent so much energy protecting the relationship that they have neglected their own peace. At that point, they start asking different questions. Instead of asking, "How do I keep this person happy?" they begin asking, "What do I need to be happy?" Instead of asking, "What can I tolerate so this relationship survives?" they begin asking, "What am I no longer willing to tolerate?" That shift can be uncomfortable for the other person because they may have become accustomed to receiving constant attention, forgiveness, and accommodation. But self-respect is not punishment. It is the understanding that you can love someone deeply without losing your identity in the process. A healthy relationship should allow two people to love each other while still having their own goals, boundaries, friendships, interests, and sense of self. So if she starts choosing herself, don't automatically assume she is trying to punish you or make you jealous. Look deeper. Ask yourself whether she is simply growing as a person or whether she is trying to recover the parts of herself that the relationship caused her to neglect. That difference matters, because sometimes what looks like distance is actually someone learning how to stand on their own feet again. Then comes the fourth stage, and this is the one you really need to understand. She realizes she can live without you. There is a major difference between loving someone and being afraid to live without them. A person can love you deeply and still eventually realize that if the relationship ends, they will survive. They may be hurt. They may cry. They may miss you. They may remember the good memories and still care about you. But they have discovered that their entire happiness does not depend on your presence. Once someone reaches that point, the fear of losing you no longer controls their decisions. They no longer feel forced to accept everything simply because they are afraid of being alone. They understand that being alone may be difficult, but staying in a relationship that constantly destroys their peace may be even more difficult. And this realization doesn't necessarily happen because someone else came along. Sometimes it happens because they spend enough time with themselves to discover their own strength. They reconnect with their goals, their friends, their confidence, and their identity. They realize that life existed before the relationship and that life can continue if the relationship ends. This is where the silence becomes very different from the silence at the beginning. Earlier, her silence may have been a request for change. She was waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to listen, and hoping your actions would finally match your words. But at this stage, the silence may simply be acceptance. She has accepted that she cannot force you to change. She has accepted that she cannot make you become the person she wants you to be. And most importantly, she has accepted that she will be okay even if you are no longer part of her life. That is why you should never wait until someone reaches this stage before you start taking them seriously. If you are currently in a relationship, the lesson is not to become paranoid every time your partner becomes quiet. The lesson is to pay attention while there is still communication. When someone you love tells you that something hurts them, listen. When they explain what they need, don't automatically dismiss it because you don't think it is important. When they bring up the same issue repeatedly, don't only complain that they keep repeating themselves. Ask yourself why the issue is still happening. If you have promised to change something, let your behavior prove that you meant it. Because eventually, people stop judging you by your promises and start judging you by your patterns. Anyone can say, "I love you." Anyone can say, "I'll do better." Anyone can say, "I don't want to lose you." But if the same behavior continues, those words eventually lose their meaning. Real change is not another emotional conversation. Real change is when the behavior that caused the conversation begins to disappear. If you have been unreliable, become reliable. If you have been emotionally unavailable, become more present. If you have been disrespectful during arguments, learn to disagree without destroying the person you're speaking to. If you have neglected the relationship, make intentional time for it. Sometimes the strongest apology is not another speech. It is changed behavior. And if you are the person who has become silent, remember that silence is not always the healthiest form of communication either. If you still want the relationship, say what you need to say. Don't expect someone to read your mind. Don't deliberately become cold just to make them chase you. Don't use silence as a weapon to punish someone. If you need space, communicate that. If something hurts you, explain it. If you need a change, be clear about what that change looks like. But if you have communicated honestly and repeatedly and nothing changes, then you eventually have to decide what you are willing to continue accepting. You can love someone and still have boundaries. You can forgive someone and still expect accountability. You can care about someone and still decide that certain behavior is no longer acceptable in your life. Sometimes people don't leave because they stopped loving someone. Sometimes they leave because they finally realize that loving that person is costing them too much of themselves. That is why the real lesson behind these 4 stages is not about learning how to control a woman or keep her from leaving. It is about learning to recognize what is happening before the relationship reaches the point of no return. The first stage is when she stops explaining because she no longer believes her words are producing change. The second is when she stops arguing because she is emotionally exhausted from trying to be heard. The third is when she starts choosing herself because she realizes that she cannot keep abandoning her own peace just to maintain the relationship. And the fourth is when she realizes that she can live without you, which means the fear of losing you no longer controls her. By that point, the silence may not be an invitation to fight harder. It may be a sign that she has already made peace with walking away. So if you care about someone, don't wait until they become silent before you start listening. Don't wait until they stop asking before you start giving. Don't wait until they stop caring before you finally understand how much they cared. When someone is still communicating, you have an opportunity. When someone is still explaining, you have an opportunity. When someone is still willing to have difficult conversations, you have an opportunity. Use it. Ask yourself what they have been trying to tell you. Ask what you have promised to change. Ask whether your behavior has actually changed. And then ask yourself one of the most important questions you can ask about your relationship. If I continue behaving exactly as I am behaving today, what will this relationship look like 6 months or 1 year from now? Don't answer based on what you hope will happen. Answer based on what your current behavior is creating. Because silence usually doesn't appear overnight. There is often a long history behind it. Conversations, disappointments, promises, apologies, second chances, and moments when someone hoped things would finally become different. Eventually, a person may stop talking because they have said everything they know how to say. So when someone suddenly becomes quiet, don't only ask, "Why aren't they talking?" Ask the deeper question. What happened that made them stop talking? That question can reveal more than an argument ever could. And if there is still something worth saving, don't try to save it with promises alone. Save it with action. Have the difficult conversation. Give the sincere apology. Take responsibility where you need to. Make the change you know you should have made a long time ago. And if you are the person who has been repeatedly hurt, remember that choosing yourself doesn't mean you stopped loving someone. Sometimes it simply means you finally understood that love should not require you to constantly beg for basic respect, honesty, attention, and consideration. The strongest relationships are not those where two people never have problems. They are relationships where both people can talk about problems without destroying each other, where apologies are followed by effort, where promises are followed by action, and where both people feel heard and valued. So don't be so afraid of your partner's anger that you miss the meaning behind her silence. Anger can still be a conversation. Silence can sometimes be the conclusion of one. And if this message speaks to you, comment silence below. If you found value in this video, subscribe to The Modern Stoic for more conversations about relationships, human behavior, self-respect, emotional intelligence, and modern life. And remember this, when someone you love is still talking, listen carefully. When they are still explaining, pay attention. When they are still asking for change, don't assume they will always keep asking, because the goal should never be to keep someone through fear of losing them. The goal should be to build a relationship they genuinely want to stay in.